Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and welcome to a special 2000 subscriber video. In the background I will be painting this old school Demon Prince using my standard Alpha Legion color scheme, but also including some extra edge highlighting and things like that. While the model may not look prime, as this model is an old resin model, it is in fact primed. I just used a different method, one that I actually highly recommend because spray primer is getting very annoying to use, mainly just because of the changing weather and also nozzles getting blocked up. The primer I do use nowadays is Vallejo's Gray Primer. This is intended for airbrushes, but it works just fine through a brush, and honestly, it's pretty fast just to put a couple coats of this onto any mini you're going to paint, and is overall a lot more consistent and easier to do, like you don't have to go outside to prime your minis. Aside from that, this is pretty much standard for my Alpha Legion color scheme. Paint them silver, then put Gryph-Charger Gray, finally, Achillean Green, and then add in some highlights of usually brighter greens to things like the eyes and so on, though I am giving this guy red skin and yellow eyes to sort of match that classic demon aesthetic. I am, of course, using Flesh Terrors as the contrast paint for all of the spits you want to be fleshy, and of course use silver on anything that isn't going to be flesh, bone, or the weapon, mainly because I decided to make the weapon a little more tricked out. Now, we are going to cut to a future me, or rather past me, I suppose, that did the answers for all the questions we got on the posts and the video leading up to the Q&A. So, I hope you all enjoy this, and I will be back soon to finish up the video. Alright, we're moving on to the questions, as I said, and we are going to start with the ones that are under my video. I did make a couple posts to accrue slightly more comments than just one post would have gotten. So we'll start with the ones under our videos, starting off with what are your opinions on Sternguard veterans? I quite like Sternguard veterans, model-wise, and I think that as a unit they're solid enough. I will eventually do a whole video on them, but I quite like the Sternguards just because they look cool, and I like guys with fancy guns. So the next question from Legua1576. What got me into Warhammer is actually... it's a story I've told a couple times before, but not recently, I don't think. I'm sure it's what a lot of people got into 40K for, was so I was a little kid, about 4 years old, maybe 3, and I walked into my eldest brother's room, and my eldest brother played Dark Angels and Black Legion, and I saw him painting Azrael and his Watcher in the Dark back in the early 2000s, the old metal Azrael. And I also saw the old Demon Prince, which this video is about, up on his shelf that was fully painted, and that model was just the coolest thing to me as a kid. And from there, the hooks have sort of always been there. I went through several sort of dark ages, if you will. I did get back into it in like the late 2000s, but only really got a couple units of Sisters of Battle. And then in like 2013, I started collecting orcs. And then I sort of fell out of the hobby after my brother sort of started going to tournaments and stuff like that. I just didn't have him around to play with. And then a few years ago, about 2020, a friend of mine mentioned Warhammer, and it just like everything flooded back to me, like it was sleeper agent activation, basically. And I've been back in the hobby ever since. And he also asked, what made me decide to start YouTube? YouTube is... I was pretty early in terms of like watching and ingesting YouTube content, so I've always really enjoyed YouTube, and really I've always wanted to make YouTube videos, and I've made a couple before, though they never really did anything more than a couple views, so obviously I'm very happy that this channel is doing very well. So it was just kind of a natural thing. I liked Warhammer, and I wanted to make YouTube videos, so why not do both? So the next one from Wolfhunter 4005. How are you? I'm fine. I'm doing all right. I've had a busy couple weeks. I'm going to see ELO next week, so I'm pretty happy for that. But I'm good. I'm living my best life. I love the city I live in. Couldn't be happier. So next from Captain Bigglesworth 1062. What would be my preferred list for Dark Angels? Is there any units in it that you feel are underrated or underused? I quite like, in terms of underrated, I quite like the Blackwing, Ravenwing Knights. I think they're very cool, and so is the Command Squad. I think they're very solid units. And my preferred list is kind of just what Dark Angels do right now. I love Terminators so much that, in reality, I wish I was seeing not 15 Deathwing Knights, but 30 Deathwing Knights on the tabletop. Really, that's my favorite archetype of Dark Angels, so I'm glad that's what's doing well right now. Next from Wyatt Wyson 7737. What is the largest, most powerful 40k character you think you could take in a fight? Um, I'm gonna be real. Like maybe, what is a 40k character I could take in a fight? Like maybe a. Um, I'm genuinely trying to think. Like um, maybe like the Red Gobbo maybe. I just have the height advantage there, I guess. And then if you could add yourself in it as a character to the game, what faction and what rules? Now that's a tough one to ask because I like quite a lot of factions, and if I could be in any of them, that's kind of a hard ask. But I mean probably like a shooty war boss. I quite like the aesthetic of big, slow firing, powerful weapons that go like boom, 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 like an autocannon. So like an orc with a giant exoskeleton with a couple of those mounted on the back, make it a character. There you go. That's my character in 40k. I'll turn that into a model someday. Next up from Patrick Joyce 7510, what are your opinions on all the Inquisitor leaders for the battle line units? So I'm not super well versed on the Agents of the Imperium codex, but I think that the different leaders have sort of their different places. I know Kyria Draxus, she allows your units to not be shot, and Kodiaz gives you like anti-chaos keywords, I think it is. I think they're all fun models. Kodiaz, I think, is slightly unfortunate that they gave him hair. I'm sure that's not what most people complain about the new Kodiaz model. But like I think they're fun models, and I think that you're not going to hurt yourself by bringing them. It's just I'm not super well versed on the Agents of the Imperium because it's not a faction that really interests me. Though someday I'm sure I'll read up on them. Wish I had a more concrete answer for that. So next up, we're on to the post that I made. So this guy asked, what originally did you get doing 40k? I already answered that. What's the most time-consuming model unit you finished? Is his second question, which he said if that's already been asked. This is from Cyandali 9575. It's my Gazgul Thraka, which I actually posted on the video on the channel. I think about a year ago, or maybe I don't know, 9 months ago. It took me about 20 hours to paint that model. Mainly because I broke it up in over a couple days. I airbrushed 3 different colors as the base coat, and really took my time. I edge highlighted a lot of it. I did some extra detailing that I usually wouldn't do. And he came out really well. He's still the best model I've painted. And really, that's sort of the long and the short of it. Next up from KRET3697, what's one kind of video you've always wanted to make but never have, and what's your favorite model style-wise? So, really, there's a lot of videos I've wanted to make that I haven't done. I've wanted to cover games that I really like outside of Warhammer. I've wanted to cover more homebrew stuff for Warhammer. But the main reason I haven't is I'm still a small channel, and I kind of have to do what works for a while. And while I want to sprinkle those videos in here and there, it's dangerous. I know that's a weird word to use, but it's tough because if I drop too many videos that don't do well because they're not the things that get views, they could really hurt my channel in the long run. So as the channel goes on, we'll see more variety of content, hopefully. But really, I just want to make content about stuff I'm passionate about. It could be anything. It could be Final Fantasy VII, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Endless Legend, Factorio. I love all these things, and I'd love to make content about all of them. But just at the moment, it's not really viable for a channel of my size. I probably need to get to 10,000 subscribers before I could consistently do things like that. Next up, we have Corvus Corax 6776. What's one faction you wish would be added to 40k? So, I'm sorry to everyone that's expecting me to say Traitor Guard or Dark Mechanicus or something like that. But it's the Sloth. So the Sloth, I'm sure a lot of you probably don't know about. They're a alien race, few in number, of basically maggot people. They're these amorphous blobs that generally take the shape of a humanoid. Each one of them is extremely powerful, able to handle Space Marines in combat very easily. Elite Space Marines as well. They can regenerate from almost any injury. They carry these very strange staves that shoot out these beams that just turn like anything they touch into slag. They have these constructs that are made of like metal and flesh that collect human brains for their sloth masters to eat. They're really cool. And honestly, I wish they could be a whole faction. or at least get like a commemorative model at some point, because the Sloth are really cool, and if you don't know about them, you should read up on them. They're very 40k, very awesome. Next up from Dark RO Skull 013, what do you think of Cybertronians entering the Warhammer 40k universe? Those are the Transformers, right? If I'm not mistaken. Hold on, I'm just going to double check. I have Cybertronians. Yeah, these are the Transformers. Yeah. Honestly, I'm not really sure. Even as a kid, I was never super into Transformers. So I really don't know. I don't know that much about them. I mean, I know like Optimus Prime looks really cool. Uh, I can't imagine that they would be very happy with how the universe goes, but I can't really say much on that because I don't know much about the Transformers lore in general. Next up, we're on to the second post that I made. First up from Delta Charlie 1760. Would you like to play a game with me? Maybe at some point we could orchestrate like some tournaments on the channel just for fun. Maybe on Tabletop Simulator. But maybe someday. Though he says, on a serious note, have you considered doing army reviews for viewer/sub? I'd love to see your takes on different lists, especially since you have insights on different factions. Yeah, if you guys want to, I could make a post where you could just put all your lists underneath it, and we could just do like a review segment on them. I generally like to look at Warhammer both from the fun and the strength aspect. I don't try to be hyper competitive or anything, but I do like my list to be strong. There is a middle ground to be had there. So I definitely would give my takes on things like that, and I would try to give out pointers. Next up from Captain Corundrum 9788. What armies do you personally play, and what do you think about Custodes? Is your answer dope? If not, try again. So, I mainly play Chaos Space Marines, Orcs, and normal Space Marines, which are Dark Angels, usually. I also am collecting Guard at the moment, though I haven't played too much with them, just on Tabletop Simulator with a friend of mine. Those are the armies I mainly play, though I find Lance of Armies very interesting, and wouldn't be opposed to, looking into them. In terms of Custodes, I think Custodes are cool. I actually have an 1,000-point army of Custodes, but I don't use them because this is just something personal with me. I like running really big units. Like in my Chaos Space Marines, I always run 10 Terminators. In my normal Space Marines, I like to run huge units of Terminators. In my Orcs, I run big units of Knobs, of Mega Knobs. I love that big unit aesthetic, right? And Custodes in this edition, you can only run them in like squads of 5 or 6. So I just don't really find that very appealing. Like, I want to run a 10-man unit of Wardens with axes and just have them march up the board, but I can't really do that. So that's the reason I don't really care about Custodes this edition, is I just can't run them the way I want to run them. Next question from KRETS3697. What's one army you hate for any reason, style, gameplay, etc.? I've made this pretty obvious in my faction tier list, the Death Guard. Now, the Death Guard, I don't like. I'm not a big fan of their aesthetic, their modern aesthetic. I think their models are really good. The details are really crisp and everything. I do have a Death Guard model. I run him as a sergeant in my Chaos Space Marines, the Death Guard champion, the guy with a little Nurgling. I really like that model, and I wish more models looked like that in the range. I'm just not a big fan of like the mouths on the stomachs and the tentacles and all that. It doesn't quite do it for me. And also, they're just not very fun to play against. They're very uninteractive and very static. Like, it's just kind of two armies going at it. Like, they ram into each other, and then it's just kind of either you destroy the Death Guard or they just don't die until the end of the game. There's not a lot of destruction going on. There's not a lot of cool movement going on. It's just a rather bland play style, unfortunately. Next up, we have Carl the Jar, 7018. Do you think the Emperor's Children will be good new models, or more of a Sanguinary Guard type deal where they're okay but not amazing? I'm going to give a quick side tangent about the Sanguinary Guard. I think a lot of people treated the Sanguinary Guard as some like affront to God, when in reality it's just kind of like Sanguinary Guard always looked pretty awful, so it's not surprising that they still look bad when they're updated to be a little cleaner. I do think they should have kept the wings, but really I think they're fine models, which is what this guy said. I just wanted to say that. In terms of the Emperor's Children, though, I have 100% faith that the new Noise Marines will look good. If we look at all the other Chaos armies, all of their new releases look good. The World Eaters, World Eaters. They looked really good. The new Khorne Berserkers look fantastic. While I'm not a big fan of the Plague Marine aesthetic, I can admit Death Guard have really clean isn't the right word, very good models. Thousand Suns are one of my favorite factions, and of course Chaos Space Marines, some of the best models GW ever makes are Chaos Space Marines. I have 100% faith the Emperor's Children will look pretty good, in my opinion. Next up, I believe this is the last question we have. We have Legwa1576 again. Why no orc content in October? This sort of cycles back to the videos I want to make but haven't. I actually did make some orc videos at the start of the month, but they just didn't do well. They really did quite poorly in terms of views, which I don't want to just do content for views, but when I'm a channel of this size, I do have to take that into consideration because the algorithm doesn't fully trust me, right? They'll push my videos if they're doing well, but if I start to release ones that don't do very well, they're going to start not recommending me, which will then stifle the channel's growth. So I wanted to do more orc content. Orcs are my favorite faction, but I just kind of, for the health of the channel, I really had to dial back. I would like to do maybe one more orc video before the month closes out, maybe painting up the orc clans. Just quick and easy on some orcs that I actually have on my desk right now. But that's why. I wanted to do like a whole month of orc content, but I released, I think it was 4 videos, and they all did pretty similarly, which was not very good. So I kind of had to put that on the back burner and go back to Space Marines, which I do like making Space Marine videos, but I would like a little bit more variety. But it's going to take some time before we really have the luxury to do that, to have more variety on the channel, not just in armies we cover, but eventually I would like to cover more games, games I play, games I'm interested in, stuff like that, outside of Warhammer. Of course, I'll always have Warhammer on the channel, but I would like to branch out at some point. Well, that wraps up our Q&A segment. I'll definitely do another one of these at 3,000 subscribers. Maybe we'll do it at 1,000 subscribers up until 10,000 or something like that. Anyways, we'll wrap up this painting video, and thank you all for listening. So, now that we wrapped up that, I figured I would just touch on the last few things. I'm using the old Coat d'Arms Blood Red to highlight all the dark red that I put on. This is just for things like the knuckles, the horns, and of course the face of the red flesh. And then I also used the original bone color that I used for all of the bone bits. And of course I did shade those all with Pallid Bone from the Army Painter. I also used Gauss Blaster Green, covered with Bealtan Green for the sword, and then just Retributor Armor and Screaming Skull. No, not Screaming Skull. What is it? I have the Burgundy I usually use for my cloth. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. And then, of course, I just washed those with their appropriate washes. The flesh tone for the gold, and then the same for the red of the grip, as well as I used Flash Gets Yellow for the eyes and the eyes on the knee pad. Aside from that, that just about covers everything that needs to be said on this one, as it's pretty similar to my standard Chaos Space Marine color scheme. I did also paint the trophy in the color scheme of my other Space Marine legions, and then I went for an older Necron color scheme for the Necron skull that's on his chain that goes around his back, and then I also did some extra touching up just on some areas that were unpainted. Anyways, we're going to move on to the 360 now. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time when we're hopefully at 3,000 subscribers. See you all next time.